You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and today is the day we sit down, we preview the 2024 inaugural UFL Championship. We are finally here. It does not feel like that long ago. We were kicking off things in week one, but now we have the Birmingham Stallions facing off against the San Antonio Brahmas in St. Louis at the Dome, 5 p.m. this Sunday, June 16th. We're going to preview the game. We'll break things down. We'll talk about some stuff that I think the teams need to be looking out for in this matchup or trying to do to come out victorious. So I invite you all to do the same in the comments section down below. Let me know, who do you think comes out victorious in the first ever UFL Championship game here? Can the Stallions three-peat and make history in spring football, or can the San Antonio Brahmas go from literal worst to first in one season and steal all the history and all the glory away from those Stallions? We'll start by taking a look at the Brahmas first in this matchup here, coming off of a dominating defensive display last week against the St. Louis Battlehawks in the very same stadium. The Brahmas, if they want to come out victorious here against the Birmingham Stallions, they're going to need absolutely all of that same effort and more to take down the reigning and two-time back-to-back USFL champions. And for me, the way I see it, it all starts with that defensive front that they've built over there. Wade Phillips has done an incredible job with the unit, and I think when you look at this team and the way they stack up, you have got to bring that heat and that pressure and be disruptive against Birmingham, and I think San Antonio can do just that. This is the team that led the UFL in sacks. They were second in tackles for loss. When you see what happened last week, you can look at from the interior of the defensive line, defensive tackle Emily Prince leading the way with 2 sacks and a couple tackles for loss, collapsing the pocket from the interior and just being extremely disruptive overall. This is a unit that can come in and wreak havoc. And when you look at the stat line for this defense last week alone, 4 sacks total and 9, almost 10 tackles for loss, just shutting everything down that St. Louis was trying to do, taking advantage of a little bit of a battered O-line, a battered quarterback, and they absolutely teed off. So I think when you look at this matchup and when you look at how these two teams played each other going back to week number 9 against Birmingham, San Antonio was all that and then some. Disruptive. They were able to bring down Adrian Martinez, probably gave him one of his worst games of the season. They finished the day with 3 sacks and 5 tackles for loss. I expect to see a lot of that same stuff emphasized going into this matchup here. If you want to take down Birmingham, you have to keep them out of rhythm and disrupt what they like to do offensively, and that is let Adrian Martinez move around in the pocket, extend plays with his legs. He can kill you with his arm. He can do it with those legs, as I just mentioned there. You have to be disruptive and knock them out of a rhythm, because if you can do that, you find yourself in a really good spot to maybe pull off a big victory here. The other box that needs to be checked, and they did this really well the first time around, is limit the 1-2 punch running back duo of CJ Marable and Ricky Person Jr. I think a lot of people look at the San Antonio Brahmas, their running back room, arguably the best in the UFL with the way they are just able to absolutely decimate defenses. But right now, CJ Marable and Ricky Person Jr., they complement each other so well with the way they do things. Marable being such a versatile pass catcher as well, on top of being a really good running back. Person, that guy that you could stick up right when you're at the 1, maybe 2 yard line. He could pound the rock in, but he can get you going to the outside as well. So you have to contain these running backs here. They held Birmingham to 78 yards in game number 1, and a vast majority of that, like 50 plus yards, came from Adrian Martinez himself. So they were able to really shut things down. And this is a run defense that's been good, but they aren't necessarily the best in the league per the numbers at the very least, but they've been very good in stopping the run the last few weeks. So if they can contain the running backs, you force them into that same situation from week 9, the first time you played them, very pass heavy type of offense. As the game wore on for Birmingham, they kind of got a little one-dimensional. You put them in a really tough spot. They wound up with only 9 points when all was said and done, but it all starts with what that defensive front can do for the San Antonio Brahmas. If they can be disruptive and if they can knock Birmingham off their rhythm, you are good in that regards, and I think you can potentially shut down this Birmingham offense once again. On the offensive side of things, when you look at what San Antonio does and what they do best, in my opinion, with the ups and downs that they've had at quarterback, being the injuries and also just some good play, some not so good play in recent weeks, and even just, I would say, even the last back half of the season, the one steady thing that has really helped bring this team to life in the back half of the season to complement what has been a great defense has been their ability to run the football. And I'm talking specifically about John Lovett and Anthony McFarland. And I think Morgan Ellison deserves some credit for that as well. But John Lovett and Anthony McFarland are the 1-2 punch dominating duo of the UFL, very capable of putting up 200 yards combined, or at least close to it, as you saw last week against St. Louis. Anthony McFarland, the first time these two teams matched up, there was no John Lovett in that game. He went for 15 carries and 82 yards. So this was a team that was able to run the football. They went for, I believe, 130 plus yards during that first game there. So I think with them offensively and kind of what we've seen from Chase Garbers since he's come back from injury, which has been kind of I would say a little bit of an up and down performance, but obviously a little bit better showing this past week against St. Louis. Interception aside, I think he had a really good game altogether, nearly 200 yards, couple of touchdowns, basically one bad mistake. But overall, because of that somewhat uncertainty, you could say maybe Chase Garbers has figured it out and maybe he's good now, but he did have a bad game a couple of weeks ago. Focus on keeping things simple, open up the pass, lean into your running backs. I think a big reason why San Antonio is in the position that they are in, obviously excellent defensive play aside, is going to be that they have just been able to ground and pound teams into submission as their running backs are averaging over 4 yards per carry. They are a dynamic duo, and as good as they come in this league, lean into your running backs. Make things easy for Chase Garbers. Don't force him to put the weight of the world on his shoulders, especially as he's continuing to knock off the rust and get himself back to 100%. I think you need to really lean into your running back duo. And I know that Birmingham is statistically the best run defense in the UFL, but since losing their defensive coordinator, things have gotten a little loose over there. Some things have leaked through that defensive front. I think you can continue to go after Birmingham right now. They're in a little bit of a tough spot, and I think you can take advantage. This is not the Birmingham Stallions run defense that we saw from weeks 1 to 6 or 7. This is a defense now that's kind of letting things get by them, and I think we saw some of that via San Antonio, the time when they played back in week number 9. We have seen some teams be able to move the football a little bit more effectively. Focus on keeping things easy for your quarterback. Ground and pound. Do what you got to do. Lean into your dynamic running back duo and open things up so Chase Garbers can do what we know he's capable of doing, as we've seen from him throughout random points in the season when he was healthy. I really want to see this offense lean into their strength, and I think that strength is John Lovett and Anthony McFarland. Lean into those guys. They are uber talented. As for the Stallions side of things, offensively, it took a big save from Matt Corral last week, but UFL MVP Adrian Martinez will get the start in this matchup here. And I will say, what we saw last week, obviously slight cause for concern, but we do have to trust in Adrian Martinez on the Stallions' end. In week 9, when these two teams met the first time, things were not great. Not great at all. When you look at the stat line, Martinez, touchdown, interception, just over 200 yards passing, but he only completed 56% of his throws, throwing for a total of 32 passes in that matchup here. And on top of that, he only had 5 total runs in the game. When I look at Adrian Martinez and the way he plays, he obviously thrives when things start to break down and when he's able to extend plays and make things happen with his legs. I think going into this matchup here, when you're going up against a team like San Antonio that has such an aggressive defensive front that is not afraid to pin their ears back and just come at you, you need to kind of use that against them. And the way you get around that is with those design QB runs, the RPO type of stuff. I'm not saying you need to completely change the playbook going into this game here. That's obviously not realistic, but don't be afraid to maybe give Adrian Martinez some more options to use his legs. I think when he's using his legs, it opens up defenses. It causes them to slow down a little bit, and they have to really respect what he's able to do, and they can't just go after him and be aggressive, because what happens with over-aggressive defensive fronts, they start to get too wide around the pocket. Things start to open up. You get massive gaping running lanes, and a guy like Adrian Martinez can kill you in those type of situations here. So Let Adrian Martinez do what he does best. Extend the plays with his legs. Give him the option. If this guy isn't open, just take off. Go. Make something happen. I think a big reason why Birmingham is where they are is in large part because Adrian Martinez, when things get a little bit crazy, is able to just tuck the ball and go and make things happen with his legs. You have to be able to let him do that in this game here. And on top of that, I think you need to design some things for him to be able to do that in this game here. Take advantage of what is a very overly aggressive but very good San Antonio defense. On top of that, I also want to see Birmingham commit to overall what has got them to where they are, in my opinion, this season. While Adrian Martinez has had some really great games passing, the one consistent thing about this Birmingham offense has been, one, how good the offensive line is at opening up what literally looks like highways for some of their running backs to go through. I think you need to really dial in this rushing attack and go after San Antonio on the ground. They are the best passing defense in the UFL for a reason, and I don't really think the ideal way is to just try to beat them by passing the football, having Adrian Martinez throw for 32 passing attempts. You need to keep the attack balanced, and you have to be able to, again, force them to, rather than attack, react more than anything else. Make them really have to think about what you're doing and lean into your running backs. The last time these two teams played, Ricky Person and CJ Marable only accounted for 9 total rushing attempts, and the team didn't run a whole lot altogether as is. You have to commit to what has gotten you to where you are, and that has been leaning on a very tough offensive line and being able to open up running lanes for their running backs here. I think it would be an absolute crime for a team that at some points during the season was pushing nearly 150 yards rushing per game to not run the football at a more honest clip. You cannot just go one-dimensional the way you did the first time around. It clearly did not work. That was by far the worst we've seen the UFL Stallions, this Birmingham Stallions offense that we've seen since the USFL days. And honestly, it might overall in the last 3 seasons between the UFL and the USFL days that we've seen, there was probably one of the worst performances we've seen from Birmingham overall, just offensively, in these last 3 years. So I do think you need to keep that attack balanced. Use what got you here, a tough running game that opened up your passing attack that allowed you to take advantage of the mismatches. You have a ton of stars that are awesome when it comes to catching the football, but a lot of the reason why things like that get the way they do and guys get as open as they do is because you were so successful on the ground. The defenses had to respect what you were potentially going to do on the football, handing the ball off to your running backs. Defensively, I don't want to say it's simple because it's obviously not. This is football we're talking about here. But San Antonio, in my opinion, lives and dies by their running back duo. Anthony McFarland and John Lovett are, in my opinion, the best running back duo in the UFL, and I'm sure a lot of people would probably agree with that. You simply cannot allow what happened to St. Louis last week, allowing nearly 200 yards on the ground, to happen to you in this matchup here. And Anthony McFarland, on his own, had a pretty strong game, nearly 100 yards the first time you matched up with this other team. So you have to be able to plug up the holes. Like your linebackers, Calvin Tazzino, DeMarcus Gates and company, they've got to plug up the holes. The defensive front needs to be tight. They cannot let these running backs get the best of them. And if they're going sideline to sideline, whatever it is, you guys have got to be able to slow down those running backs. Because if they get going, again, the defense has been so good in San Antonio that I can't believe I'm saying this about the Stallions. You potentially might not be able to keep up if they really get the ball rolling. Again, they did not have John Lovett the first time these two teams matched up. With John Lovett and Anthony McFarland being able to split those carries up, and you just have them coming in fresh, passing the baton back and forth between the two of them, good luck if they get the ball rolling here. And like I said, I know the defense in Birmingham has been really good all season long, but since losing their defensive coordinator, things have gotten by them a little bit more than we saw in those first, 7 or so weeks before, obviously, the changes happened. So you have got to stop them on the ground. Otherwise, they are going to feast the way we have seen San Antonio push past 200 yards rushing multiple times this season. On top of that, I think another guy you really got to keep an eye on, and he had a big part of why you lost the first time around, wide receiver Jontre Kirkland. He led the team in receiving the first time around, 66 total yards altogether. All eyes have to be on him at all times, and not just because he's a great wide receiver, of course, but because of what he did that 36-yard trick six, throwing a touchdown pass. You have way too many guys that are talented in that secondary in Birmingham to allow stuff like that to get by you. From the safeties to the defensive backs, Ike Brown, Lorenzo Burns, Neville Clark. Like, you have so much talent in that secondary, just to name a few of the guys. You cannot be letting things like that get by you. You need to be aware of what he's doing, because clearly he knows how to throw the rock, and I would not be surprised if they're playing off the idea of there's no way San Antonio would try that again. They already did that to us once. Why would they try to do that again? And then try to pull out something similar, if not maybe the very same thing, and see if they can get you with it. Jontre Kirkland, though, trick play aside, is a threat, arguably one of the best wide receivers from this past season in the UFL. You've got to make sure you know where he is at all times. If you can slow him down, you can help slow down that passing attack that San Antonio has here. And again, I know there's the big question of where is Chase Garbers right now, because it's been a little bit of an up and down performance so far since he's come back from his injury. But one interception aside last week, I would argue he was pretty close to just being nails. I think you need to make sure that you're limiting their number one wide receiver. And thankfully, you don't have to worry about a guy like Cody Latimer out there as well, but you still have some other guys that you need to focus on. But Jontre Kirkland is the one guy you need to make sure you know what he is doing at all times, because the last thing you need is him throwing another touchdown pass on you, or maybe catching some bomb from Chase Garbers in this championship matchup here. Now, overall, the way this game matches up here, this is tough. This is tough to pick because, again, you have a team that is just trying to barrel towards history, the Birmingham Stallions looking for that three-peat, and then you have a team like San Antonio, like the Cinderella story, the darlings of the UFL right now, coming in trying to shut down that history and do the worst to first flip that we've seen so many times in football year after year. I am so torn on who to go in with this. I've spent the better part of the last 2 days while I'm at work, just sitting at home, kind of thinking about, who do I realistically think comes out victorious here? And I keep going back to just how good this San Antonio defense looked the first time around when these two teams played. And on top of that, I also look at some of the struggles in the recent weeks that we've seen from Birmingham and what they've dealt with. And I'm a very big defense wins championships kind of guy. I always talk about that. Defenses will always win out, the great ones, that is. And something tells me that we're looking at a special defense in San Antonio. And if you had asked me this question prior to that game against Birmingham in week number 9, I probably would have just hammered the table, not even really had to think about it and say the Birmingham Stallions. But since then, I have had to really think about this possible matchup again, if this was what we got. And now that we're actually here, I think I'm leaning, and I cannot believe I'm saying it, but I think I'm leaning with the San Antonio Brahmas for the win here. It's just, there is so much to like about this defense, and especially what they are able to do on the defensive front. It's just hard for me to sit here and not buy into what they're doing, because they have looked so good, not in spots, but week in and week out. So disruptive. It's typically multiple sacks a game. The tackles for loss number feels like it's crossing at least 5 to 6 every single week. If not, it's at least 4. They have so much going on that defensive front right now, and Wade Phillips has his guys just locked in. And after the performance we saw last week, I'm a little bit concerned about how this Birmingham offense is going to look again, especially with a 9-point performance the first time around. I think it's going to be a tight game. It's definitely not going to be a runaway by any means. I think the game winds up being a little bit closer than we saw the first time around. I do think that we might see a few extra plays getting pulled out that we have not seen from either side as well, so maybe it runs up the score a tad bit more in the matchup here. But I'm taking the San Antonio Brahmas, and I'm taking them 23-17. I think it's a competitive matchup, but the one thing that really sticks out to me has been the slip in defensive play from the Birmingham Stallions over the last few weeks, and I think that is something that winds up being the deciding factor here. And I genuinely do not know how Birmingham, even with how great their run defense has been for a large majority of the season, if not the entirety of the season, I don't know how they're going to stop John Lovett and Anthony McFarland, because they are on an absolute tear as a duo right now. And I think that they are X factors in this game. And I would not be shocked to see them being a large reason as to why San Antonio comes out victorious. So I'll take the Brahmas 23-17. Unfortunately, I don't think the three-peat's happening. I am rooting for Birmingham. I think I should say that to you Stallions fans that probably hate me right now. I am rooting for Birmingham, but there is like a sick feeling in my gut that San Antonio is going to come in and that defense is just going to give them more problems. I think we maybe find a little bit more success from the Stallions in this matchup here offensively because they're a little more prepared having seen it now. But I do think the Brahmas defense ultimately winds up being the X factor in keeping the Birmingham Stallions at bay and being able to come away with a win in a semi-low scoring affair. But let me know in the comment section down below, who do you think is coming out victorious? Who reigns supreme in the inaugural season of the UFL, the 2024 year? Is it Birmingham? Is it San Antonio? Who's coming out victorious? Let me know in that comment section. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.